All right, we are live. We are live. And good evening, all, and welcome to our Woke Wednesday conversation on social justice and our responsibility for this 2020 presidential election. We're so glad to have you here tonight that you're tuned in. If you would take a few seconds off to just like and share this video. Share this video with your friends. We're going to have some very important conversations tonight, and we're going to be giving out some very important information on this show. I'm joined tonight with some wonderful activists around the state of South Carolina, and I'm going to pause at this time for them to introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll go first. So
All
I
right.
am Bree Maxwell. I currently reside in Columbia, South Carolina, and I work for Jamie Harrison, who's currently running for United States Senate.
Amen.
Reverend Grady, you want me to go? I'll go next.
Okay.
I'm Christina Q, and I am currently residing back in South Carolina between Columbia and Aiken. And I formerly served as the Deputy State Director for Senator Elizabeth Warren, as well as the South Carolina State Director for Secretary Castro. And so I'm a political consultant and working on multiple projects here in the state right now.
Amen. All right. And Reverend Grady?
I think he may be frozen.
Yeah, Reverend Grady may be frozen. Well, this is the Reverend Kerry A. Grady. He is the pastor of Reed Chapel AME Church. I'm not sure if he's coming back in, but he is also a community activist, and we're glad to have him as well. All right, well, let's get started tonight. We know the severity of the moment in the context that we live in. And so I want to just start off with this question. What's at stake in this next presidential election? As we are 95 some odd days away from this election, I'm curious to know what issues you are tackling, what you see, what do you want to see change in this upcoming election? What's at stake for us as African Americans living in South Carolina? And what's at stake for the nation in this election?
Christina, you can go first.
Okay. Well, I appreciate this question because today Donald Trump just announced his reversing the AFFH rule. And as someone who
Hmm.
actually worked in Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Obama administration under Secretary Castro and Secretary Sean Donovan, this was a huge moment for us in our administration,
Hmm.
and this is a big deal. It took us several years to get this done. A lot of my colleagues worked day and night to get this done, and what this means is basically about allowing low-income housing, fair housing in all communities, and addressing housing discrimination. And so
Hmm.
this is just a serious attack on our communities. And I mean, he literally said that he did. Basically, this was to avoid low-income housing in the suburban communities. And if you can read between the lines, you understand what he's saying there. And so that's what's at stake. There's an attack on us as minorities of color, on our
Hmm.
achievement, on our economic growth, on our educational growth, every kind of freedom and liberties that we have, and even our abilities to achieve more. That's what's at stake here. And
Wow.
so I think this is a perfect, timely example of what we have to lose.
Right. Right. Thank you,
Mhm.
Sister Bree.
Yeah. So I think it's a number of things that's at stake, especially in South Carolina. And I know the question was name one thing specifically. And
Hmm.
to me, one of the major things that's at stake is healthcare. And we can clearly see that with what's going on with this COVID response and how this administration is handling it. We have a lot of non-medical professionals trying to tell us exactly how we should be living right now and how our children should be living right now. And then on the flip side,
Hmm.
we have a lot of the baby boomers are getting older, and a lot of people are not able to afford healthcare. And one thing that we need to do is remove implicit bias from healthcare, because with that, we wouldn't have all these Black women dying during childbirth. And then we wouldn't have a lot of people having these pre-existing conditions that they're not able to get proper care for. So, and for that, I can use my father as an example. He had sickle cell, all his life. And his doctors, within his last few years of his life, the doctors would basically, he'll have a 5-minute doctor appointment, then he'll go home. But he was clearly in pain, and we know what pain sickle cell does to a person. So I think one thing that is at stake at this election clearly is healthcare, because the Trump administration is clearly and slowly trying to overturn Obamacare. Well, the Affordable Healthcare Act.
Right. And with so much at stake, with so much weighing down on our consciousness and our existence as Black people in this nation, why do you think that voter turnout is so low? I pastor in the community of Darlington, South Carolina, and around in our last election that we had, around 60% of the people in the city, population 6,000, did not turn out to vote, and they would have made a big difference in the outcome of the election. So, what is it exactly, in your opinion, is the problem with voter turnout, particularly in our neighborhoods and communities of color?
I think one thing is people are not motivated. They're besides them not being engaged, they're not motivated. You have to be able to reach people where they are and go out into these communities and actually show them that you are doing the work for them. And I think that's one thing that's kind of sort of missing with our politicians these days. That's kind of sort of what's missing in politics. That's missing with both parties. People are doing it business as usual, just to do the work, but not necessarily doing the work for the people. So we need candidates that are motivating people, that get people riled up to vote, like they did with 2008 with Barack Obama.
Right.
And to that point, Bree, I think a lot of people are looking for that kind of Obama-esque candidate, or that kind of Obama, esque movement or moment. And that's like a moment that can't honestly be recreated, right? And I think we have to, as a community, be very intentional about how we communicate what's important and what we need to do in our communities. Like, for example, in my hometown of Aiken, South Carolina, I don't know if you know, there was a issue with our school superintendent here in our county superintendent, and he was fired, really unethically fired, and it was a huge uproar in the community. Standing room only in the school board meetings.
Wow.
When it came time for folks to run, and a lot of school board members left the race out of frustration for how everything went about, and it was definitely a racial undertone issue to it and that sort of thing. And but when the community was there when they were angry and mad, but when it came time to not only vote but also run for these open seats that became vacant by people who just said, I don't want to be even a part of something like this that is so detrimental to our children, they quit. One of our longtime school board members for over 30 years, she taught my dad, Rosemary English. She was a major pillar in our educational system. She retired over it just out of frustration, and only one person of color ran for those open seats, and they became open. And so not only are we not voting, we're also not running and don't feel qualified to run, and so we need to change that systemic kind of thought process in our community.
And then also with the running aspect, we have to support our candidates. A lot of times we get very valuable candidates that run, but we don't support them. So on the flip side of that, we also need to make sure that people are running and that they are also supported
by our communities.
Absolutely.
By our communities.
Reverend Grady,
by our communities and by our dollars as well.
Absolutely. That's actually Pastor JD. That's like really key, because we don't even know how important our dollars are. Like $20, a difference, especially in local races. Like if 100 people gave $20, that's now $2,000 of money that they can use for resources, and people don't understand, like, well, what are they doing with that money? They're like actually scheduling phone banks. They're, printing materials to get to you to educate you about their race or about their candidacy, so they don't even understand the fundamentals of, politics to know that it actually costs money to do this, and like why every little bit matters.
Right. Reverend Grady, we are talking about voter turnout. What are some of the things that faith leaders can do to inspire our communities to turn out the vote?
Of course, great question. I think help the communities that we serve understand the political process and help our communities of faith be exposed to the candidate. Voting, I don't think a lot of people realize. A lot of people who don't pay the process a lot of attention because they simply don't know. Especially you have 2 jobs. You work out. You get 5.
Reverend Grady, you're breaking up.
You get 5. When you have time to vote, can you?
We can kind of sort of hear you. Yeah, you're going in and out, Reverend.
A bigger picture. Okay, I'm gonna try to. Okay, I think the bigger picture issue is we make voting even more accessible. Prime example: how many people do vote in election as a hospital? The millions of people who vote don't because they're in the hospital. And I'm talking about persons who are unable to talk or maybe incoherent. Let's say you have a thing the day back and you go to the emergency room. You can hear all your but you write it, send out that you can't get out of the hospital early enough to vote on the day of the election. And so people don't understand millions of people are not counted because they're in hospitals and because they are in nursing homes or rehab centers. And many of those persons can vote. But the other side is a lot of people just disconnect the political process. And I think faith community we should help persons understand the political process without swaying their vote, but helping bring candidates to them to understand the political process.
Wow, that's so good. And I think one of the points that you were making, Reverend Grady, was that there are people in hospitals and people in rehabilitation centers who are eligible to vote, and who desire to vote, but it's impossible for them to vote because where they are. I'm not sure if you gave us kind of an answer to that conundrum, but what do we think, and this is for all of the people on the panel, how can we make sure that people who desire to vote have a chance to vote despite the circumstances that they may be experiencing during the election day?
Reality, go first.
Go first.
Y'all don't be shy.
Can you ask that question one more time? I'm sorry.
How can we ensure that all who are eligible and desire to vote have the opportunity to vote on election day?
Well, one thing we can do is we can encourage everyone to go and vote early so that, one, they don't have to worry about voting on election day and they do not have to stand in line. They can vote early. They can also apply to be poll watchers or poll workers. Of course, that'll probably be a day out of work, but it's also a day that you are getting paid, making sure that democracy is working for all of us. So I think one way we can do that is also voter education, making sure that we're going into communities, making sure that people are educated on what your vote really means and how your vote really matters, and also encouraging people who are out of prison to vote, letting them know that, you clearly can vote. We just have to educate the ones who have been told that they cannot vote, that you can vote now. So I think those are 2 things that we can do, because with the people who are getting out of prison, they are told that they can't vote and they're encouraged not to vote. So a lot of them never vote. So that's a certain demographic of people we also need to reach.
And I think, and just to piggyback on that, I think too, I think that making sure that we understand the importance of absentee voting. Like as a community, we think, oh, I don't want to vote early and I don't want to do absentee because it's not going to count. And so we have to attack that kind of thought process that we have, especially in our communities, because and especially in this cycle, in this upcoming election, there are gonna be so many tactics to try to suppress our vote. This cycle specifically, there's a lot of seats up for grab. Particularly, I'll make the plug here for you, Bree. Jamie Harrison's race against Lindsey Graham, like that's a hot campaign, like, that has national attention right now. And and the Republicans know that, right? So they don't want to lose that seat. So they're going to try to do everything in their power that they can to make sure that our community does not come out to vote, like Democrats do not come out to vote. And so we need to educate our base and let them know absentee voting is, a viable way of early voting and getting your vote out there before, rather than going through the process of the long lines. I don't know if you guys had this experience in Darlington, but I think it was pretty statewide for the June primary, where we had a huge turnout that we were not anticipating in the June primary. So while that was a point that I wanted to make, while we talk about, our community largely doesn't vote because it was only about 22% turnout, which is still low out of 100, right? But it was higher than it had been in previous years, and it was way higher than what was anticipated. And so we do have to take that consideration into account, that folks are truly motivated by the current situation and the current administration, and they will come out. And they were out there in droves for hours, longer hours waiting times than Barack Obama's race in 2008. And so we do have to take that in consideration and really advocate for our community to get out there and do absentee voting.
Wow. Reverend Grady, the question is, how can we ensure that all who are eligible to vote have the opportunity to vote on election day? I think Reverend Grady's connection might be. All right, we'll go into the next question. With the increasing number of hospitalizations and deaths from this COVID-19 virus, as they continue to rush us every day, what should we be doing to protect our children as they're prepared to enter back into school for the 2020 academic year?
Well, I think one thing, if you can keep your children home and do virtual learning, because that's going to be the safest option. But if you are not able to do that, then one, just make sure that you are sending your children to school very well prepared. One, with prayers. Two, with masks, proper masks. And I would even say gloves. And then when they get home, immediately make sure their clothes are washed, disinfect their book bags as much as you can. But we have to make sure that our children are going to school safe, because it's quite obvious that the South Carolina school system are not concerned about that. They just want to send the kids back to school. That is their biggest thing right now. They want to send the children back to school. And we all know, living in a Republican state, that the one thing they do not care about is public education. And Betsy DeVos is the same way. She does not care about public education. And we see our governor just put, $32 million to private schools? That is money that could be going to public schools to make sure that our children are safe, make sure that they are learning equitably with everybody else, and make sure that they have the materials that they need. But in order for our kids to go back to school, we have to get these COVID numbers down. And right now, I just don't see why anyone would want to send their children back to a schoolhouse, as my grandmother would say, the schoolhouse. But if you are not able to leave your children at home, just make sure that they are safe, of course, with masks and gloves.
Yeah, I agree.
Reverend Grady?
Yeah, I agree absolutely. I think it's safety first. And as far as COVID is concerned, it's safety for our children first, and it's people over profits at all costs. What I'm concerned about is like daycares and persons who are essential workers and persons who really don't have grandma or that extended village to take care of their children. And I'm concerned about those facilities because often we talk about public school, but we talk about child care centers, so on and so forth. And a lot of people need those services, and a lot of places are not probably being as safe as they could. And the economic impact of child care centers and daycare centers that are closed in the community, because that's our people working. But again, it's safety over anything else, and it's people over profits at all costs.
And Reverend Grady, what might the church do to help with this problem of educating our children in this academic year that's
Well,
coming?
I think every church has a lot of retired educators in it, and so we may have to do some tutoring. We may have to do some virtual tutoring. Our church mothers, our church sisters, our church brothers and sisters who are educators, retired educators, so on and so forth, or those who are just inclined in certain areas. I think COVID-19 has done a couple of things. It's letting us know what we really can live with or without, but it's also going to require that the faith community really be the village that we used to be and that we still are called to be.
Yeah. I love that, Reverend Grady. And I also think, I think about this as education suppression, right? Like, there are so many tactics that, we think about a lot of kids who don't have, the extra grandmother at home or the extra mom at home. My dad and my mom are both educators. My dad's a pastor and an educator as well as my mom. And so we're blessed that they are able even to tutor and work with our my brother, my siblings' children throughout the summer. But everybody doesn't have that that afforded to them. And so this is an attack on educating our babies, and they're going to fall behind if we as a community don't pull together to do something about it. Because and I think their safety first is paramount, and then education, right? But we have to get creative at home and in our churches to make sure that we are the ones that are answering the call to address this issue. Absolutely.
And one of the things that Reverend Grady said, and I felt was very important, really to reiterate, was getting our retired educators out to make a difference with our children in regards to teaching them this academic year, even if that looks like the church has been using Zoom for 20 weeks now. So what it would look like if we get some retired educators on Zoom, right, and have them to tutor or to teach on Zoom, or what it would look like if we can kind of convert our campus, our space, to maybe host a school, to have extra students there on our campuses. So I think you all are correct in saying that it's going to take a community approach to keep our kids safe in regards of going back to school, because this COVID-19, y'all know, is not playing any games with us, and I fear that as our children go back, we will lose some of our young kids, and that is so unfortunate. So we have to be on top of our game there. What strategies have you all found effective for organizing communities in South Carolina? And I guess all of you have some organization and organizing backgrounds. What strategies have you found effective for organizing us here in the state of South Carolina?
For me, there are four major, and now Jubilee Justice, but there historically have been four major organizations that believe in organizing congregations. So, the civil rights movement was so successful because not just people, but congregations organized for change, right? And so in the United States, we got an organization called PICO, People Improving Communities Through Organizing, which recently changed their name to Faith in Action. Then you have the DART Network, Direct Action Research Training, Gamelio, and then the Industrial Trades Organization. But those organizations go to communities and help congregations, not just one congregation, organize for social change. So in Columbia, And in other parts of the state, there's an organization that has come in and helped churches organize. And so that's been helpful for me, because when I used to pastor in Indianapolis, I was a part of the Faith in Action group, and we had like 60 congregations. And if it were not for that organization, I never would have met many of the white clergy in the city, or people from different faith backgrounds. And we studied together. We met once a month for clergy luncheon, read articles and papers and books on justice. And then when it was time to organize around injustices in the community, we were together. So the answer to the question is being connected to other faith communities that are not like yours, understanding the social issues, and then building people power.
I was going to say, I wholeheartedly agree with that. That actually ties to another answer that I have for our next question, but I'll answer this question first. Sorry if you hear some background noise, but my three things would be targeted data. I think it's so important. When we're working on campaigns and running campaigns, we try to make sure we get out and knock on doors, and make sure we make phone calls. But if we're not targeted in what we're doing, we're not effective. And I truly believe that, and I stand by that every campaign that I work. Digital organizing is also key. I think, especially in this COVID climate, we have underestimated the resource of digital organizing, and Bree knows that very well. Like, in these, especially in the presidential cycle, we don't put as much emphasis on it as, because we kind of depend on that voter to voter contact, or that person to person contact. And so like now in this season, digital organizing is just so paramount, and like making sure and investing in the resources and making sure your team is equipped to be able to do that effectively is really important. And then also connecting your candidate or your issue with the current social justice climate. I think that is like really key and paramount to being successful. And that, even in my last local race, I think we did a really great job of that with Nada Rutherford's race in South Carolina. And, a lot of people heard her vocalizing her frustrations over the George Floyd death. And they associated that with social justice, and people are craving a new wave of energy, a new leadership, and they are just wanting and looking for that right now in this season.
So I think I'll take what Q said a step further and talk about targeted voter groups. So I think one thing for me is I like to focus on women, whether they're black, white, or whatever. I like to focus on women because, white women voted 53% for Trump in that election. So it's like, how do you sway them from voting for Trump going forward to vote for Democratic candidates who will actually look after their issues that we're facing? So I also like to not only do targeted voting, but targeted voting groups. And I also I've divided everybody into 3 tiers. So you are either a voter who votes all the time, a sporadic voter, or a voter who never votes. So what I have been doing is making sure my focus is on sporadic voters and voters who never vote. Come to find out, a few of my family members are sporadic voters, meaning they vote presidential, but they don't vote midterms. Or these are people who haven't voted since 2008, since Obama first ran. So it's a situation of making sure that these same people, like I said before, are engaged and they have the proper voter education that they need. And also, if you're working with the candidate, making sure that candidate is plugged into certain communities. Because we're going to always have people who vote, but we have some people who don't vote, and we need to figure out why. And that candidate needs to know why. And the people need to be plugged into the candidate. And I think it's mainly a situation of meeting people where they are. You can't expect for people to come to you. You got to go to them. And besides just running TV ads and doing stuff on social media, you got to have boots to the ground in the street, meeting the people, because not everybody watch TV, not everybody listens to the radio, and not everybody has access to internet, which we know is a major issue in South Carolina with the lack of broadband access.
Absolutely.
Sister Christina, you talked about digital organizing. And I guess with the challenge that Sister Bree just presented with not everyone having access to the internet, I'm wondering, what would it look like? What does that look like for us in South Carolina? And what does that look like for faith communities who want to organize their communities digitally because of the COVID-19?
So that's a great question. And I think it just looks like starting with the basics, right? Like, I think, when we in a like when we get into arenas that we're not familiar with, we try to overcomplicate it or overthink it. And I think just starting with the basics, and broadband is a real concern here, especially in our state, in our rural communities. But generally, a lot of people have Facebook, right? Like now, our kids are starting to get on Facebook and starting to get on some of these apps more often now, because they're bored, they're at home a lot, they can't go out, and so folks are resourceful, and even now you're starting to see a lot of older, especially in my dad's church, a lot of our older demographic have gotten on Facebook. Now they know how to join the Facebook lives, or now they know how to get on Zoom, right? My grandmother up in DC was telling me how she joins the Zoom for her Sunday school. So I think our folks are resilient, and they will gravitate to whatever we set up for them. But it's just starting with the basics. Make sure you have a good Facebook page for your church. Make sure your church is connected to the Facebook page, making sure that they understand how to how to communicate with each other on there, so that way when you have an event or you have anything that you need to communicate in mass, that they're all there, and that everybody knows how to connect with each other. So that is like the first key thing I would say is that Facebook group is like a very good starting spot for them.
And I think another thing that is really important is if, I think Reverend Grady, you may agree with me about using our virtual platforms now to kind of plug the issues, to register people to vote. What would it look like every day if a pastor gets up in their virtual sanctuary and say, listen, if you have not registered to vote, go to vote.org and fill out the application and print it out and send it in. Showing the steps to take for people to register and the steps they need to do to check the status and to tell where polls are. Like, how can we use that and weaponize that as a tool? I think that would also make the difference in trying to get people out. And to engage people in the political process as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
On the heels of the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, what can communities of color, particularly in South Carolina, do to keep the police accountable in their communities?
Man, that's a great question. First, I think we all know that the Trayvon Martins, Sandra Bland's, Michael Brown's, Breonna Taylor's, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd. So those things have been happening since the beginning of time for us. Now that they are captured, now we actually have proof. But I think one thing that we can do is find whatever strategy would best work in your community. So for instance, we have things like GVI, gun violence intervention, which is a 3-tiered program that helps check the police department in their level of violence. It's a 3-tiered program that's a partnership between law enforcement, community stakeholders like the United Way, churches, community centers, and thirdly, people who have been affected by violence. Okay. And oftentimes only 2 of those groups are at the table. But when you get the last group to the table, then you can get some change. We do need police. We need community policing. But not only that, right here in Columbia, the NAACP is launching a report card for law enforcement, for the city police and for the sheriff's department. And so those things can help keep law enforcement in check. And then lastly, the thing we can do is that when we see disparities in violence to our people, and one of the things that's so critical is a lot of people always want to bring up, well, why do Black people protest and march when a white officer kills a Black male? And the reality is there's all this Black on Black violence. Well, that's stupid because one, people kill each other who look like each other. So white people kill white people, Asians kill Asians, Hispanics kill Hispanics, et cetera, et cetera. But what we have proven is that the group that is most violent towards law enforcement is white males. We definitely know that statistically right here in Richland County. But what we can do is continue to have those outpourings and saying that this is not going to happen, but making sure our NAACP, our justice organizations, and our politicians hold law enforcement accountable for these disparities.
I think a few local things that we could do is joining our citizen advisory boards with our police departments, or if they don't have one, convince them to create one, convince them to start one, and put community leaders on there, put faith leaders on there. That is a way that you can hold police accountable. And then with these citizen advisory boards, making sure that you are sitting in on review boards, or you are also sitting in on hiring boards, making sure that we're checking the backgrounds and the psych evaluation of these officers.
Right.
And then not only doing community policing, but making sure that we are holding these people accountable. If there's something that we see that we don't like, hold them accountable. And if they're tired of you holding them accountable, then they don't need to be in that position, and we need to get rid of them.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of your points, Pastor Grady and Bree. And another thing I would say too is that that like one of my dreams is for our churches, is Pastor Grady kind of touched on it earlier, but about our churches coming together and across different faiths, across racial differences, whatever, and just coming together as a community of churches to address the systemic issues. So like there is a initiative from Tony Evans Church down in Texas, and they're even offering if you've built that community of churches within your local communities, they will train your group on how to like implement what they have done down in Dallas, and I think it's called the Urban Alternative. I may have like totally jacked that up, but it's a really great initiative, and I was even talking to my dad about it because I think it would be so powerful to see the churches come together in this season. That is what God is calling us to do, is to be the church. And and it's hard for pastors to really break down their pride and say, I don't know how to address this, right? Like, I need help with this. And so, we stay in our silos, or we stay to ourselves, or we stay, with the pastors that we know. And sometimes our ministries can't grow, our denominations can't grow, and we need to like stretch beyond our limits, right? And stretch beyond our walls. And that's what I love about, I know I sound crazy, but I really love this about the quarantine time, is that, everything was on an even playing field, right? Celebrities, if you were a celebrity, if you're a regular person, whatever, we're all on the same, IG live trying to see the next thing happening, and everybody's in one room chatting together. And, it just kind of put us at a same even playing field where we can come together and, connect better and relate better with one another. And, it doesn't matter, where you come from, your social, economic status, or whatever, we all have the same issue, and that's fighting for justice and, and being the church. And so we can come together and, address these systemic issues. So imagine, just all churches of different faith and races coming together to go to the mayor's office and say, hey, we need a coalition for us. We need an accountability group in place for our police department. We need an accountability place, for, all these different areas, our education system, where we can go and meet with our school superintendents as a group and say, hey, this is what we need for our young people in education. And so I think that would just be so powerful. And then another good action item, or another thing that I saw that really spoke to me, was when Pastor Stephen Furtick of Elevation had that conversation with Pastor John Gray. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it was the most vulnerable, most real, raw conversation of a white pastor and a black pastor, just having that uncomfortable conversation about race, right? And racial tensions, and bringing that to the church and bringing that to the forefront of the church, where you had to just sit there and watch it, because it wasn't them preaching, but it was him sharing his story as a black man and what he experiences. And then Stephen Furtick relating to him as a black pastor who has black members, but maybe he doesn't understand our struggles. And so how does he grapple with that? And so those are the kind of things that God is calling us to do in this season as faith leaders, is to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that has happened in Columbia and in Richland County that we should be very proud of is that More Justice, a local organization, pushed something called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training. What they found was that about $28 million a year is wasted in unnecessary arrest. Okay, particularly arrest of persons who have behavioral health issues. So what was happening all across the state of South Carolina, and particularly in Richland County, is someone who may have a behavioral health issue, may have forgotten or didn't take their medication. There may have been an altercation at the house. Someone called the police. The police get there. They don't know. They know the person has behavioral health issues, but they don't know how to de-escalate the situation. Mm-hmm. So what happens is they arrest the person. Person goes to county jail. While they're in county jail, they get unnecessary psychological tests, which adds up and costs millions of dollars. Or they're arrested and they're taken to a hospital where they get tests that they really don't need because persons don't know their behavioral health background. So this organization, More Justice, pushed the city police, the police department of Columbia, and the sheriff's department to get the officers trained in crisis intervention training. And the training is geared towards persons with behavioral health issues, but the training is so good, it crosses across the gamut. And what happened is the police department got 101 officers trained, or 110 officers trained in 1 year. The sheriff's department got persons trained. And what they found is that it has de-escalated situations in Columbia. So the point I was trying to get at is that officers need more training. At the academy, they learn how to shoot, they learn how to arrest you, but they don't learn how to deal with people. So not just behavioral health training, but sensitivity training, learn how to deal with Black people, and Black officers need to learn how to deal with white people as well. So training in how to deal with people and how to de-escalate situations, that's critical.
A lot of Black activist organizations are calling for the defunding of the police. Is that something that the church should be calling for as well?
I don't think we should be calling for the funding of the police department. I think we ought to look at how the police department is funded. And going back to what I just said, I think we need to look at putting a lot more resources into training police officers, and not just the academy. I think we need to put resources back into community policing, maybe neighborhoods that are hot spots. Maybe we need to, instead of having a big precinct office building, police need to be spread across the city. A lot of people think this is crazy and terrible, but I had a friend from college who was killed as it relates to mistaken identity. He was shot and killed. There are movements across the country to get some departments to use non-lethal ammunition. Now, some people say, oh, that's absolutely crazy, but a taser is non-lethal ammunition. And there's other forms of non-lethal ammunition. If you look at the stats across the country, there are many people who are killed because they were just at the wrong place, wrong time, mistaken identity. Well, you can't bring them back after mistaken identity. So maybe there needs to be some other tactics, of ways that we take people down. So not so much for me defunding, but redirecting the way that police officers are trained.
And just
agree. Oh, go ahead, Hugh.
You go ahead, Bree.
I was just going to say, I agree with Reverend Grady, and I think words matter and words are important. Instead of defunding, I think we should refund the police. And what I mean by that is just rerouting the money, rerouting where the money goes, whether we need to invest more into better trained and highly trained officers, invest the money more into community and community programs. But I don't think the topic should be defund, because if we're defunding them, then who's protecting our communities? Who's protecting us? We still need police to protect us, but we also need proper police training and proper police protecting us in our communities. Instead of policing our communities, we need you to protect our communities. And then on the flip side, we just have to change the narrative. And I think that starts with all of us. Mm-hmm. And we just need to make sure we're holding police accountable and making sure that these departments are also transparent.
Absolutely. I was just going to agree with both of you guys. I don't need to repeat it to echo it. The only thing I was going to emphasize is the stigma around defund the police and how it really confuses a lot of people. And but it's exactly what Bree said: refund the police. I mean, Bree, I guess we should start a hashtag after this panel and and get that going viral, because that is what it means. Like, it means taking away the funds from the police, so they don't need $20 million for their annual fund. They need to, like, break that, see what they can do to allocate resources to more community programs that will help bring accountability and bring investment into the communities that they serve.
There's something that most police departments and sheriff departments have. Is called the Citizens Academy. The police department has one, so does the sheriff's department. I think they're about 10 or 12 weeks. I went through the one a couple of years ago for the police department, and I went and I learned so much about what I didn't know about law enforcement. But I think if more people did programs like that, they would understand the police department. And I think the more people who did programs like that, the police would actually understand us. But it's like 10 weeks, all different sorts of classes, and you just understand the policing department. But they learn from us as we go through the class as much as we learn from them.
Well, this has certainly have been great. We're at the 45-minute mark, and time flies when you're having fun, I guess. So let me just say once again, thank you all so much for your expertise and your willingness to share your expertise with tonight. And so I want to end this way with giving us an opportunity to make some kind of final remarks and final statements. If there's anything else you would like to add to this conversation, you can add it now.
I'll start. I just want to say to Reverend Grady, thank you for being the faith leader who is so present in our community and engaged and aware of what's going on. I think you are a great example of what we need across the board in every denomination. I know the AME kind of has that pride, political. When you're talking about political campaigns, they're always, we got to get to the AME church, we got to get to the AME church. And I think that's amazing. And I think every denomination needs to have that that kind of power and that kind of influence, because it's so critically important. So I just want to say thank you to Reverend Grady. Ever since I met him and been back in the state, he's been just so engaged and so aware of what's going on. And he's one of my first calls that I make whenever I need to get his ear and his insight. So thank you so much. And thank you for having me on here. Tawana Thompson, who you guys know very well, is a really good friend of mine. So I thank you all for inviting me, and I'm just excited to participate in the conversation.
So I want to say thank you too for asking me to be here. I always love to have a conversation about church and politics. So that's always a good time for me. And I watch Reverend Grady's service every Sunday. So thank you for the online service. So I appreciate that. But I also think this is a very important election year. I know we say that usually every 2 to 4 years, but this is really, really, really important, because we got to think about, do we want 4 more years of the person that we have in office? Do we want 4 more years of someone who is putting judges in place who are reversing everything that's affecting our lives? We got to think about, is that the person that we want as our, making laws and regulations for our children? Those are things we got to think about. So I think at this point, we have to start putting our mouth and our money to our feet. Meaning we can have so much to say on social media. We got to stop being social media warriors and actually be on the street warriors. We got to start holding these politicians accountable. We got to start running for office. We got to figure out the resources that we need to run for office, because you may want to run, you may not be a great candidate, and we got to figure out how to make you a great candidate. And vote Jamie Harrison. That's it. Go to www.jamieharrison.com, and it's spelled Jaime. This is a very pivotal election year, and we need him to unseat Lindsey Graham.
I want to thank Reverend Dennis and all those a part of the Freedom Summer Academy, Reverend Green. I want to thank our sisters on the platform. And I just want to echo the sentiments. And I just want to say, there was a question you guys asked earlier, and I couldn't get in because I was jumping in and out. I want to just echo all the sentiments. This election is important. This presidential election is important because The president, who's going to be the president, can appoint Supreme Court justices and federal judges, and that is very, 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 very critical. I know that I'm inspired by the legacy of the African Methodist Episcopal Church with Richard Allen, Paul Quinn, Henry McNeil Turner, Jarena Lee, and the list goes on and on and on. And I just want to be the best Christ representative I could be and bridge the gap between Christ and our community. To God be the glory.
Well, once again, thank you all so much for being a part of our.
You're muted, Pastor.
Social media handles. Oh, can you hear me?
We can now.
Can you hear me? You can now? All right. Let me just say once again, thank you all of our panelists for being here today and sharing your expertise. If you, the viewers, have any questions of our panelists, their social media handles are right by their names. Please feel free to reach out to them to ask your question. If you would like to be a part of the Freedom Academy and this Freedom Summer that the Faith for Black Lives and the Black Church Action Fund is putting on, please go to www.thefreedomsummer.org/register. Give us your information and we'll be in touch with more information for you. We're trying to register people to vote and we're trying to get them out, turn them out for the November election so that we can make a difference. Once again, thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to the Black Church Action Fund for making this happen. And we'll be back with some more interesting conversations about social justice and the issues pertaining to our communities on Woke Wednesdays. Y'all be blessed and have a wonderful night.
Excellent.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.
We're done. We can leave the studio.
Yes, but we're still live. All right, I tell you what we'll do. We'll just leave the studio, and then I think they will shut it off once we leave. So once again, everybody who's still with us, thank you, and we'll talk again real soon. Y'all be blessed.
Bye.
Bye-bye.